Hello, welcome to the Cascadian. Let's get started. Today I'd like to talk about the LEAP Manifesto, written here in Canada 3 years ago. I think it's going to be our premise of a Green New Deal here, and that's something I'm deeply concerned about myself. So yeah, I think that's the best place for us to get started here on this channel. I'd like to make a full video series about this, as in the Green New Deal and kind of a socialist vision for Canada's future here. The LEAP Manifesto is premised on the idea that in Canada, we are not doing enough to handle climate catastrophe and everything else that's going on with the global capitalist system. So what is necessary is a leap, everything at once, essentially. We can't do it incrementally. We have to go and do it all at once, and we need to completely reinvigorate our economy at once. And this is possible, and this has been done before with the New Deal back in Theodore Roosevelt. I will link to a couple Jacobin articles about the New Deal because they're great. And if you ever saw the Bernie Sanders speech a couple months ago, where he talked about the New Deal and his vision of a New Deal for America, we're talking about very similar things here with the LEAP Manifesto. Why is it that we have to do it all at once? Well, it's quite obvious, because we live in a capitalist and neoliberal world. Without doing it all at once, we're going to be subject to those forces slowly and incrementally taking apart our movement. So it truly does have to be all at once or nothing at all, in the sense of, if we don't do it all at once, we're not going to have anything left, and so there's going to be nothing at all. I'd like to go over just kind of the premises of LEAP today, and a little bit of what I think about it, and just to introduce you to the basic ideas of what a Green New Deal would look like here in Canada. Because, I mean, I could read you AOC's Green New Deal, but it's no fun, you know? It's not about Canada. What is the premise of LEAP? Canada is not good right now. We're not what we want to be. And we're not sustainable, we're not equal, and we're not really nice. We don't treat our First Nations very well. We don't treat migrants very well. We don't even treat our working class very well. Just like the US, we have the working class has not seen a raise since the 70s, and the taxes, or the rich, have only received more and more tax cuts as we've moved forward. So that's the premise of this. We're in quite a dire situation. It starts off by saying that we need to cooperate with First Nations communities across Canada because of multiple reasons. One, because they're the most affected by our current capitalist and neoliberal regime. They've experienced the most hardship under the neo-colonial settler state of under Canada. And they also offer us the most value in what we're trying to do. They have the most expertise on sustainable development of the land, and they also have an insane amount of expertise on spiritualism, opposed to individualism, which is something I'm going to get into in later videos, but it's essential that we break through of our materialist, consumerist, individualist world right now into a truly spiritual, communal way of thinking that we can truly empathize with each other and not have so much hatred. And the First Nations communities and Indigenous communities of Canada are going to be absolutely essential to achieving that. One example of the expertise the First Nations and Indigenous communities can offer us is small fires throughout BC and Alberta. So controlled bush burning and basically burning dead leaves and stuff on the ground floor of the forest is something that, of forests, is something that First Nations and Indigenous communities have done throughout North America and South America for their entire existence. And what it does is it prevents such a, basically the leaves and the mold and the mildew on the ground acts as like timber and kindling for starting a forest fire. So we need to get rid of that and burn it in a controlled fashion so that we don't see massive forest fires. And this year, living in BC, was the first year that I didn't actually get blacked out through smoke and everything else. And so that was great, but next year is going to be worse if we don't do controlled fires this winter. So that's one example. A general premise of the LEAP Manifesto is that energy must be built sustainably from now on. And so many people are going to agree with this. This is a very basic point. Why are we building a pipeline? There's no point. Why are we investing in something that's going to keep us producing oil 20 years, 30 years into the future. We need to stop now. We need to have stopped 10 years ago. And any further investment into something that is not sustainable energy, or at the very least clean nuclear energy, is malicious to the environment and to our future children, especially to even the generations right now. I'm part of Gen Z, and like, am I going to live past 40? Who knows, you know? We need to act now. One thing I think the LEAP manifesto is missing is a jobs guarantee. What a jobs guarantee will do is effectively eliminate unemployment throughout the country. A jobs guarantee is a federal program put on by the government where any Canadian citizen, and throughout many cases, I'm sure migrants could apply as well, to get a high-paying, desperately needed job throughout Canada. One thing that always is brought up to the youth today is that boomers will tell us, you know, back in my day, I worked at Home Hardware in the summers, and I made, you know, $6,000 that summer, and my tuition was $2,000, and I paid $200 a month for my rent, and that was enough. Basically, you could make enough in the summer to pay for your school and tuition and housing and everything else. There's no effing way we can do that today. The 2 years I've spent going to school cost me $18,000 in 8 months. What the jobs guarantee can do is, if you take, it could have an implemented program that if you want to take a summer job with the government as a student, you could be put to work retrofitting a home, you could be digging up a pipeline, you could be planting trees, all while making money for you to go back to school. Part of the program could be to have a discounted tuition price if you work for the government in the summer. Because when we start this program, when we start truly retrofitting every single home in the country, digging up all the pipelines, and completely re-energizing our energy sector to be sustainable, we're not going to have enough workers at all. We're not going to have even close to the amount of workforce we need. The US won't even have enough workforce for what they need to do. So we're going to need a mass migration into the country so that we can actually build a sustainable society. But also, we're going to need every hand on deck. So all of these students can easily do this for the summer, and we can have a total incentive program for them to make $25 an hour, have a good living wage, work an 8-hour day, and you know, have benefits and have everything else secured for you through the government. And one thing that people are always going to ask and bring up at this point is, you know, how are we going to afford this? You know, the LEAP manifesto has a part in it that I'm going to link to that details how we can afford all of these things. But to put it simply, what we're going to do is stop giving money to the rich and tax them better. And realistically, we have all the money we need for anything we want as a working class society. However, even if the money wasn't necessarily here, I would ask you, what is the point of our society? You know, we live in a welfare state. And the state was created basically out of World War II to be a welfare state so that we could provide for everyone and prevent such terrible conditions which allowed the Nazi Party to manipulate the German people into such a way that caused World War II. So without those conditions, if the German state had been a true welfare state at the time, Hitler would have had no chance. Do you see what I mean? People have to be disenfranchised and in a terrible position to even align themselves close to fascism. And so I ask you, what is the purpose of our welfare state if not to provide high-paying jobs to the working class, right? You know, what is better than giving a student a $25 an hour job so that they can afford school and then go back to their families and their friends and enjoy life? What is the other thing we should be doing? Giving tax breaks to the rich again? I don't think so. Another essential part of this LEAP manifesto is that they want to reinvigorate democracy across the country. And so an easy way to do this is to reinstall energy decisions to the local people that it would affect. So, for example, here in BC, we don't want a pipeline. We don't. And so that should be enough. The people of BC voted against a pipeline. And that is a democratic decision that should not be overturned. If the people of Alberta want a pipeline, and they vote democratically for that, sure, they can build it up to the BC border, right? That's the essential part of this. And it even goes further because it can go into tiny little local communities. So I live on Vancouver Island, and up in Cowichan, there's a company that was polluting the lake, Cowichan Lake. And the community got together and said, we don't want this to happen. And it was a federal decision. It was a provincial decision to do all of this. But it shouldn't have ever even risen to that level because the local community didn't want their local lake polluted. That's that, right? That's the basis of our democracy, and that's how we need to realign it. It's very social democratic, and, you know, a social democracy is going to be necessary. And we're going to also need to democratize our workplace. So that can be done through LEAP as well. In terms of workforce, like I mentioned earlier, we're not going to have enough workers. However, we do have a massive infrastructure of highly trained oil workers and carbon workers in this country. So all they need is a 2 to 6 week course, which we already have government subsidized programs to encourage people into, like their plumbing ticket or their electrical ticket, that are only 6 week courses at a time. So it's 4 6-week courses implement with 9 months or 10 months of work in between. That's the general premise, and you go through 4 years of that. And then after that, you have your full ticket, and you're a plumber or an electrician or a bricklayer or a mason or whatever. And all we need is one of those courses to be paid for by the government, so that these carbon workers can stop working in carbon and suddenly put up wind farms or dig up pipelines or retrofit a home. The solution is right in front of our face. Additionally, the LEAP Manifesto calls for a high-speed rail connection between all of our communities, and this is absolutely brilliant and necessary. Rail is easily our best option moving forward in terms of transit, especially international and across provincial borders. It's just we're never going to be able to justify flying in a sustainable world, and I personally am of the opinion that we're never going to find or build an electric plane. It's possible, but not in 100 years, so it's practically irrelevant to me. We need high-speed rail, and if we're going to go to Europe, you're going to have to take a boat, and that's just that, right? So we could have the one thing the LEAP also calls for, kind of not defund, but less funding for the military. I support that. However, I wouldn't support that if we could instead put our military industrial complex to work. So maybe instead of being on reserve, we could employ all of the reservists into high-paying jobs and have them build a goddamn pipe or a goddamn rail system from Edmonton to Calgary, from BC to Calgary. And I know that there's rail already set up, but we need much, much more. Because realistically, if we're looking 25 years in the future, the only option we're going to have is massive urban sprawls connected by electric rail, which from there can have a metro system or a bike system, or possibly some electric car systems to get through. But we're not going to be able to have the same kind of rural life that we have today. It's just not going to be possible. We're going to need to all exist in a high-density urban sprawl. That's how it's going to be. So investing in rail now is absolutely essential. And it would be even better if we could put our military to work doing it. They're very capable. So one thing it also calls for is to reinvest into our infrastructure, which is basically the same thing as rail, so that it doesn't crumble under the looming climate catastrophe. I like this, and one thing I want to add is that if we really, truly want to look forward to the future, we must accept Canada's position on the global scale, and that is we are a mixing pot, and we're hardly full. It's my opinion that we don't really have a culture as Canada. We just have Tim Hortons and early morning hockey practices and whatnot. You might disagree with me there, but it's not too easy to do so. And within 15 years, I expect to see hundreds of millions of climate migrants on the move. And if we are truly empathetic people and we're truly looking to the future, why are we not investing in massive urban sprawls, completely sustainable and completely planned, built in our geographical locations least likely to be affected by climate change, right? So imagine like China literally has cities sitting, waiting for them to be filled by their people or by migrants during the climate catastrophe. We should do the same. Our culture is that we are a mix of cultures, and we need to accept that. LEAP calls to localize and make sustainable our agricultural system. So this is very, very, very important as well. Ask yourself, why does every home with a yard not grow vegetables? Why does every community not have a local vegetable garden capable of feeding those in need? Why doesn't it? Because we don't try to fix these problems right now. We live under a neoliberal capitalist regime that doesn't give a fuck. Additionally, what I like to think about is huge investment into vertical farming. So vertical farming is the future for agriculture, in my opinion. Imagine a shipping container filled with potatoes and then carrots and then lettuce and then tomatoes and then strawberries and etc. Now imagine, instead of a grocery store, we just have a supermarket full of those vertical farms where you can literally just go, walk in, pick your food, pick your dinner, and leave, right? And it's automated. And it uses 95% less water than agriculture does currently. Something around that number. It could be as low as 80. Ooh, it's still incredibly better than what we have going on right now. Those cities could be built with vertical farms in the housing units, so that you could, instead of having to go to the market, you could just wake up, go to your thing, pick a potato out of your vertical farm, cut it up, make some hash browns and eggs for yourself in the morning for free, and it has almost no carbon impact, no carbon footprint, right? Why is this not our primary concern right now? Again, it's because we live under a neoliberal capitalist regime that doesn't give a damn. One thing LEAP also calls for is a massive expansion of our non-carbon economy. So more teachers, more therapists, more counselors, more public planners, more social workers, more access to all of these services. That's really essential. We have highly educated social workers that are working at a Starbucks right now. It's atrocious that we aren't putting them to work effectively. We have a massive mental health problem in this country. If you look at the recent BC murderers, Breyer, Skaminsky, and Alan MacLeod, they had horrible mental health situations, and that pushed them into Nazism, quite literally. Mental health is something that we need to be deeply concerned about in this country. And the only way to fix it is to reinvest massively into our non-carbon economy. That's been my take on the LEAP Manifesto and what could become our Green New Deal here in Canada. I hope you liked it. Talk to you soon.